Try to remember your third birthday. Go ahead, close your eyes, and try a little harder. What is the very first image that floats to the surface of your mind? Perhaps it is a flickering candle on a chocolate cake. Perhaps it is a bright red balloon drifting near the ceiling, or the distant, muffled sound of laughter. It feels warm, nostalgic, and entirely real. But clinically speaking, what you are picturing right now is almost certainly a lie. It is not an actual memory. It is a digital replica, a composite illusion stitched together by your adult mind, using old family photo albums and stories you have been told over the years. Your brain expertly built a bridge over an empty void, creating a beautiful counterfeit just to keep you from staring into the dark. This psychological blank space happens to almost every single human being on this planet. We walk through our lives carrying a massive silent gap at the very beginning of our conscious existence. Scientists call this phenomenon infantile amnesia. When you look at it deeply, it reveals a profound and unsettling paradox. Between the ages of 0 and 3, your brain was undergoing its most critical hyperactive development. You were absorbing the fundamental rules of reality at a speed you will never match again. Language was rapidly forming. Unfamiliar faces, complex emotions, and thousands of new voices were pouring into your mind like a torrential flood. This short, forgotten period fundamentally shaped your attachment style, your deepest anxieties, and the invisible baseline of your entire adult personality. Yet despite its monumental importance, the archive is completely missing. Almost none of it stuck. For decades, mainstream science accepted a very simple, comforting theory to explain this mystery. It was assumed that a baby's brain is simply too small, too fragile, and too structurally underdeveloped to record long-term data. It was a logical conclusion that satisfied our common sense. But as modern neuroscience began to peel back the layers of human development, this leading theory turned out to be entirely wrong. The infant brain does not fail to record the camera footage of your early life. The hardware is fully functional, the files are successfully saved, and the data is securely locked inside. This realization forces us to confront a much stranger, more kitsch-teen question. If the memories were successfully captured, where did they go? The answer does not lie in a weak storage system, but in a hidden, active force operating within the shadows of your early development. To understand why your history was stolen from you, we must first look at a series of groundbreaking psychological experiments that shattered everything we thought we knew about memory. We must look at the hidden patterns of recognition that prove your mind was never truly empty, and the invisible hunter that was deployed to systematically erase your beginning. To truly comprehend where your childhood went, we must first dismantle the comforting myth that your infant mind was a blank, incapable slate. For generations, we believed the data was never written. But in the 1980s, a visionary researcher named Carolyn Rovey Collier designed an experiment that shattered this assumption using nothing more than a colorful crib mobile and a piece of silk ribbon. She placed infants, some as young as 3 months old, flat on their backs in their cribs. Above them, a vibrant mechanical mobile danced in the air completely out of their physical reach. Rovey Collier then gently tied one end of a soft silk ribbon to the baby's ankle and connected the other end directly to the mobile overhead. Babies driven by an innate desire to interact with their environment are astonishingly fast learners. Within a matter of mere minutes, these tiny infants stumbled upon a striking recognition pattern. Every single time they kicked their leg, the mobile above them danced. The realization was instantaneous. Their eyes widened, their hearts quickened, and they began to kick furiously, completely delighted by their own newfound agency. They had successfully formulated a cause and effect memory anchoring a behavioral pattern into the deeper layers of their minds. But the real paradigm-shifting test came weeks later. Rovey Collier brought the exact same infants back into the laboratory. This time, she left the ribbon disconnected initially to see if the past experience had truly vanished into the ether of infancy. The babies lay still. But the absolute moment the silk ribbon was reattached to their ankles, a remarkable thing happened. Without a single second of hesitation, the infants immediately started kicking their legs with intense enthusiasm. They didn't need to relearn the trick. They didn't need to experiment. The recognition pattern was fully flawlessly intact. The scientific implications of this simple experiment were massive. It proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the infant brain possesses a fully functional, highly sophisticated architecture for long-term memory storage. The hardware was working perfectly. The camera of early life was recording in high definition, and the files were successfully saved. The data was there, but as these infants grew into adults, that data became entirely unreachable. locked away in a vault to which we no longer hold the key. The brain was not an empty vessel. Something else, something far more deliberate and aggressive was happening to that information afterward. In 2014, a profound breakthrough occurred in Toronto that completely redefined our understanding of this mystery. Two brilliant neuroscientists, Paul Franklin and Sheena Jocelyn, decided to look at the problem through an entirely different lens. Instead of asking the passive question of why early memories naturally fade away over time, they asked a much more active Keachting question. What if something inside the developing brain is actively hunting down and destroying those early memories? Their intense investigation led them straight to the hippocampus, the seahorse-shaped structure tucked deep within the temporal lobe that acts as the brain's primary sorting facility and gateway for long-term memory. In a newborn baby and throughout early childhood, the hippocampus is not a quiet, stable archive. It is a site of absolute biological chaos, undergoing a process known as neurogenesis, the explosive rapid birth of billions of brand new neurons. Standard logic would lead you to believe that a massive influx of new brain cells would naturally expand your cognitive capacity, making your memory system stronger, larger, and more efficient. If you add more hard drives to a computer, you get more storage space. But in the cruel, counterintuitive irony of human biology, Franklin and Jocelyn discovered that the exact opposite is true. New neurons do not simply slide into empty waiting slots. Instead, imagine a massive, aggressive construction crew bulldozing their way through a historic, tightly knit city to build a hyper-modern transit system. As these billions of newborn neurons violently force their way into the hippocampus, they do not preserve the past. They physically rewire the existing neural circuits, tearing apart the delicate, microscopic connections that your older childhood memories completely depended on. They overwrite the biological code. In their groundbreaking laboratory studies, when Franklin and Jocelyn artificially accelerated the rate of neurogenesis, existing memories vanished at an alarming speed. Conversely, when they artificially slowed neurogenesis down, early memories remained preserved for significantly longer periods. Your infant brain did not fail you. It was systematically, relentlessly clearing its own slate to make room for the overwhelming torrent of new information still arriving every single second. Yet this biological demolition crew is only the first half of the equation. There is a second deeply psychological architect behind this grand erasure, and it belongs entirely to the domain of human language. Pioneering research by psychologist Patricia Bauer revealed a profound truth about how the human mind organizes its reality. Our ability to successfully retrieve a long-term life event is inextricably bound to our ability to structure it into a coherent narrative. Before a child acquires language, their experience of existence is fundamentally fragmented. It is a chaotic tapestry woven from raw sensory data, sudden spikes of adrenaline, a distinct emotional tone, the scent of skin, or the blurry looming silhouette of a caregiver's face. An infant experiences the world deeply, but they experience it in pieces, without words to act as a filing system, and without a narrative structure to organize the chaos into a timeline of before and after. These rich sensory fragments have absolutely nowhere to anchor themselves within the mind. They are floating islands in a vast ocean completely disconnected from any mainland. This is precisely why infantile amnesia does not lift like a sudden curtain overnight. It dissolves very slowly like morning mist, usually between the ages of 2 and 7. It is a beautifully timed dance. As the explosive rate of neurogenesis in the hippocampus finally begins to slow down, the child's linguistic brain rapidly matures. Words arrive to build the filing cabinets, locking your experiences into a permanent chronological narrative structure for the very first time. But this realization leaves us standing at the edge of a much deeper, more unsettling psychological precipice. If your brain was designed to deliberately destroy its own history just to clear space for your cognitive development, it forces us to re-examine the very nature of who we are today. This biological mechanism was not a temporary phase that simply switched off when you blew out the candles on your 7th birthday. The machinery of erasure did not disappear, it merely shifted its pace. And as we transition from the chaotic growth of childhood into the structured reality of adulthood, we must confront the hidden, ongoing cost of this evolutionary design, a cost that is silently being paid by your adult mind at this very moment. This devastating biological and psychological reality forces us to confront a fundamental evolutionary question. Why would nature design a machine that intentionally burns its own origin story? Why would evolution spend millions of years perfecting a brain that systematically deletes its own beginning? To answer this, we must step away from our human desire for nostalgia and look at the brutal, unyielding economy of survival. Nature does not care about your sentimental attachment to your first steps, your first favorite toy, or the lullabies sung to you in your crib. Nature cares about efficiency, adaptation, and keeping you alive. An infant crawling across a floor is entering a world of immense complexity and immediate danger. In those critical first few months, that child does not need a passive, beautifully organized photo album of yesterday's events. It does not need to store the historical data of what it ate 90 days ago or what color shirt its caregiver wore last Tuesday. Instead, it needs something infinitely more urgent. It needs to master the invisible laws of gravity. It needs to decode the incredibly subtle nuances of human facial expressions. It needs to instantly recognize threats, and it needs to accurately predict the behaviors of the people protecting it faster and more efficiently than any adult brain ever will again. To achieve this superhuman feat of rapid learning, the infant brain must operate at maximum computing power. It requires a level of neuroplasticity that is almost incomprehensible. And here lies the core psychological and biological conflict that evolution had to solve. A brain optimized for rapid hyperadaptive learning is fundamentally incompatible with a brain built for rigid long-term storage. You cannot have both running at full capacity simultaneously. If the brain spent its precious energy anchoring every single sensory fragment into a permanent archive, it would lack the speed and flexibility required to constantly rewire itself in response to a brand new world. Something had to give. A profound trade-off had to be made. And what gave was the historical record of your earliest years. Your childhood history was the hidden mandatory cost paid for your survival and your intelligence. But this is not a transaction that concluded in your youth. If you are sitting here today navigating the complex world of adulthood in your 30s, 40s, or 50s, it is incredibly easy to look back at infantile amnesia as a distant, isolated relic of your ancient past. We comfort ourselves with the belief that once our language matured and our hippocampus stabilized, the active eraser inside our minds finally packed up its tools and stopped running. We like to believe that our adult mind is now a reliable, permanent vault, carefully archiving the story of our lives. But neuroscience delivers a second deeply unsettling blow to this illusion. The machinery of erasure did not disappear. It merely slowed down. Adults grow new neurons too. While the explosive, chaotic storm of neurogenesis from your infant years has quieted down to a steady, subtle drip, the factory deep within your hippocampus never fully shuts its doors. Every single day, your adult brain continues to give birth to thousands of fresh brain cells. And because the fundamental laws of biology do not change, the exact same mechanism that ruthlessly wiped out the first 3 years of your life is still quietly, seamlessly, and relentlessly running in the background of your adult mind right now. You are living in a continuous slow-motion state of erasure. Think about it deeply. What did you have for lunch last Tuesday? What was the exact phrasing of the email you sent 3 weeks ago? What was the face of the stranger you stood next to on your morning commute? Yesterday. You cannot remember. Millions of micro-experiences, conversations, sights and sounds that felt entirely real and vivid while you were experiencing them have already been targeted, dismantled, and deleted from your mind forever. You walk through your adult life assuming your memory is a complete, unbroken narrative, but it is actually a Swiss cheese of massive silent gaps. You simply do not panic because your brain is an expert at hiding the trash can. It seamlessly smooths over the edges of your forgotten days, leaving you with the comforting illusion of continuity. This realization extracts a heavy psychological toll. It challenges the very definition of identity. If we are the sum of our experiences, what happens to us when the majority of those experiences are quietly deleted by the very organ designed to protect them? We spend our adult lives chasing moments, building careers, forming relationships, and collecting memories, all while harboring the terrifying suspicion that the vast majority of our lives will eventually be erased by the background processing of our own biology. The hidden cost of having a hyperadaptive living brain is that you are fundamentally forbidden from keeping your own past. This brings us to a critical existential crossroad in our understanding of the human mind. We are forced to look at this ongoing internal theft and ask ourselves if we are truly flawed, decaying creatures, doomed to lose our stories, or if there is a deeper, more profound meaning hidden beneath the surface of this empty silence. To survive the unsettling truth of our own fading minds, we must look beyond the horror of the loss. We must prepare to reframe the entire purpose of memory itself, transitioning away from the fear of what has been deleted and moving toward a radical, liberating understanding of why our minds must choose to let the past go. To survive the unsettling truth of this ongoing biological theft, we must radically reframe our fundamental understanding of what the human mind was actually designed to do. We have spent our entire lives operating under a deeply flawed cultural metaphor, assuming that our brain is a cold mechanical hard drive, a passive digital archive whose sole purpose is to meticulously record and preserve every single second of our existence. When we find the archive empty, we panic. We view forgetting as a symptom of decay, a malfunction of the flesh, or a tragic failure of our identity. But neuroscience and psychology offer us a profound, liberating correction. Your brain was never meant to be a storage vault. It is not an archive. It is a ruthless, brilliant editor. If your mind kept a perfect, unedited record of every breath you took, every mundane email you read, and every stranger you passed on the street, you would be paralyzed by the sheer crushing volume of useless data. You would be trapped in the amber of your own history, entirely incapable of moving forward. Your brain looks out at the vast, overwhelming canvas of your daily life and constantly asks one vital evolutionary question. What is actually worth keeping to make this person wiser, faster, and more adaptable tomorrow? Everything else must be deliberately burned away. The erasure is not a design flaw, it is the core feature of your survival engine. Forgetting is the active process by which your brain clears out the dead brush of yesterday to protect the living forest of your present. This realization allows us to validate the silent spaces within our own lives. Infantile amnesia is not a tragic black hole. It is simply the most dramatic, visible version of a beautiful, necessary mechanism that your brain performs for you every single day for the rest of your life. The child you once were had to sacrifice their memories so that the adult you are today could inherit an agile, hyper-adaptive mind capable of navigating a complex world. Your history was not stolen from you. It was invested into the very architecture of your consciousness. You do not need to consciously remember the ribbon tied to your ankle, the sound of your mother's earliest lullabies, or your first chaotic steps to carry their weight. Those forgotten moments were processed, digested, and converted into the invisible foundation of your personality, your resilience, and your capacity to love. So, try to remember your third birthday one more time. Close your eyes and reach back into the fog as hard as you can. You still cannot see it. The wall remains unbroken, and the archive remains perfectly dark. But as you stand before that blank space now, the terror of the emptiness is gone. You no longer see a loss, and you no longer see a failure of the mind. You realize with profound clarity that the silence stretching back to your earliest years is not empty at all. It is heavy with meaning. It is the solid, beautiful bedrock upon which the entire story of your life was built. Your brain deleted your beginning so that you could have a destiny.